Welcome to the 2022 Candidates Forum, sponsored by the Wallingford Community Women in conjunction with Wallingford Government Media. I'm Jean McFarland, the program moderator. This segment features the candidates running for state representative in the 103rd District. The format will be as follows. The first part of the program will consist of questions asked of the candidates by two reporters from the Record Journal. They are Jessica Sims, Wallingford reporter, and Crystal Eliscano, reporter for the Latin Communities Reporting Lab. The second part will allow each candidate to make a closing statement. During the question and answer period of the program, each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to the question. The opposing candidate will be allowed 1 minute for rebuttal. To conclude the program, each candidate will have 3 minutes to make closing remarks. Prior to the program, a flip of the coin determined the order of questioning. Before beginning the questioning, I'd like to introduce the candidates running for state representative in the 103rd District. They are Liz Linehan, Democrat, and Randy Rains, Republican. Jessica Sims, would you please ask the first question of Liz Linehan?
The COVID-19 pandemic has taken a toll on the mental health of many of our children and youth. In Connecticut, according to the CDC, suicide is the second leading cause of death among people ages 10 to 34, and the state overall ranks 11th in the nation. What measures do you propose to help address this situation?
Thank you so much for asking that question and actually making it your first question, because it is that important. This past legislative session, I was proud to author some landmark legislation on children's mental health, where we are investing $100 million in our children. And included in that is a plethora of items, including prevention. We are funding a lot of prevention, which I think is, I'd much rather prevent suicide than work post-suicide and helping a tragedy. But we're also looking at putting plenty of dollars towards getting doctors into the state, recruitment and retention of doctors. We have a shortage of those doctors, and we want to make sure that there's enough people there, but we also want to have more licensed clinical social workers in schools, so we put an extra $20 million into that. Another $20 million went to the services within schools that would help have kids understand themselves and I have 1 minute. There's so much to talk about. Essentially, what we're doing is we are putting people inside the schools in order to work with kids. We are funding the doctors. We have put together a program to fund programs for the development of psychology students and working with kids through DCF. $100 million worth of things that we're doing, and I would talk about it for 3 hours if I could. It was so hard to condense. But yes, I think it's one of the biggest problems facing our kids today, and as chair of the Children's Committee, I was very proud to write and pass that legislation, and it is now, parts of it went into Chris Murphy's bill for national legislation, and additionally, we have states across the country who are looking to emulate that. So there's really nothing more important coming out of COVID than really protecting the lives of our children.
Thank you. Randy?
Certainly mental health is a crucial issue, not just for children, but for adults as well. My problem with what Ms. Linehan just said is the government is throwing millions and millions of dollars without having any idea whether that money will be spent effectively. As a businessman, myself, as a manufacturer, you would never do that. You would first check, see what other states are doing that that are effective or may not be effective, so that you don't you don't duplicate the mistakes, and you go forward with the things that do work.
Thank you.
Excuse me, may I rebut after that?
No. Oh, there's
you.
one rebuttal. He gets the rebuttal, and you'll get
Double rebuttal. Got it.
No double rebuttal. Crystal Eliscano, would you please ask your question of Randy Rains?
Do you agree with the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade?
When I was a young man, single, no kids, I thought abortion was a rather unpleasant way to fix a mistake. Once my first child was born, it was a transformative moment. I couldn't imagine anything worse than not having him or my grandchildren. But by the same token, there was a 10-year-old that was raped not too long ago, and there was another woman that was carrying a child that had no skull. As a parent, the worst thing that could happen to you would be to lose one of your children. And I can't imagine how the inhumanity of making that woman that was carrying a child that she knew was going to die. I cannot imagine the inhumanity of not allowing her to have an abortion. Now, as I say, I'm not a huge fan of abortion, but it troubles me. But I can see where you have to have exceptions. Roe v. Wade is kind of it's a non-event, really. The Supreme Court said it's not in the Constitution. They didn't say it was illegal. They didn't say the states could not have abortions. They just said it's not in the Constitution. And, certainly our legislators are capable of creating a law that does allow it. I would hate to be the person that created that law that made the exceptions. I just think that it's too divisive a subject to leave to politicians. I think it ought to be left to the voters and have the voters decide. And because if politicians decide, it just creates anger. If the people decide, I think there would be less.
Liz?
Before you start the timer, can you please repeat the question?
Do you agree with the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade?
No, I do not agree with that at all. Unfortunately, I didn't actually hear an answer from my opponent, so I want to be as clear as possible. No, I do not agree. I absolutely do not agree. I will never agree, and I will always fight to protect a woman's right to choose. Thank you.
I'd like to rebut, too.
Yeah, but you can't. You can save that for your ending comments.
Okay.
Jessica Sims, would you please ask your next question of Liz?
Government has the responsibility to support education, healthcare, public safety, and other services that are not profit centers. Do you think that the government should be run more like a business, and how do you see that being possible?
Thank you for that question. That's a really insightful question, actually. Do I think that government should be run like a business? No, I don't. It's not a business. In government, we are in the people business. We are not in the profit-making business. With that said, though, we do need to spend our money responsibly because it's the taxpayer money. And we have seen that we can do that. Since I've been in office since 2017, and we passed the bipartisan budget, we have actually been doing nothing but spend wisely. And when I say spend wisely, I actually really mean investing. And in addition to being able to have the largest rainy day fund in history, we have also paid off so much of our past pension debt that was ignored for the past 70 years that we can actually now have $440 million every year in the budget freed up simply by paying off some of the past debt. And that eliminates what we need to pay out in the future. So with that $440 million, we can now provide services for people, including the healthcare and the public safety, that doesn't force us to raise taxes. So I think we've seen since 2016 through 2020 exactly what happens when someone tries to run the country more like a business person. And essentially what happened was they forgot all about people. And that is not what government is about.
Thank you. Randy?
Well, in terms of spending our money wisely, they spent how many millions of dollars to build a ball field in Hartford that was 10 miles away from another ball field, so millionaires could have their playground. But in terms of running a government like a business, do you all recall the way the motor vehicle department was before COVID? And then it seemed like they started running it more like I would run a business. And now the motor vehicle department's a great place to go to. I think certainly Mrs. Linehan is correct that the government is in the people business and we have to take care of people. But so is business. I have, you know, between 4 and 8 employees over the years. And, you know, without them, you're nothing. And as a human being and as a businessman and as a profit center, I mean, whether you want to call it a profit center or humanity, it's
Thank you.
the way you treat people. I'm sorry.
That's
ran
okay.
over.
Crystal, would you please ask the next question of Randy?
To what extent do you support the state police accountability law that was passed in 2020?
I'm not a huge fan of that law. I believe that the police do need to be held accountable. I believe that if cameras were required on all cops, and they were required to be turned on, and the cameras in their cars were required to be turned on, it would go a long way toward eliminating some of the problems. Now, I know there's bad cops. I mean, I don't question that, and I'm sure some cops go overboard, some good cops go overboard. I think cameras would go a long way toward fixing that. The other thing is, I think if the police union was more of a craft union that was interested in the job their people were doing, it would go a long way toward eliminating police problems. The cops know who the bad cops are. I mean, they do. And if the police chief had the authority to fire them, I don't think we would have as many problems. Now, you know, in fairness to anybody that gets accused, in the military you could appeal, and then you would have, you know, your compatriots and senior officers, and you know, follow an appeal, and I think that's fair. But I don't think that cutting police salaries is or cutting, not their salaries, but cutting their budgets is a good idea. Somebody in the audience disagrees with me.
Liz?
I thank my opponent for giving the answer he gave, because I think that it clearly demonstrates the lack of understanding of what actually is contained in the Police Accountability Bill. The Police Accountability Bill did include $6 million in funding for cameras and made the cameras required. They are required to turn them on when they are in the course of their job. Additionally, he mentioned defunding the police. This bill in no way defunds the police. Additionally, we've given them even a $15.6 million more in this past budget. Nobody is defunding the police. The bottom line is that this has been the one bill that has been surrounded with misinformation since its inception, but not one police officer has had a problem with the bill since it's gone through. Qualified immunity it is still in place. The only thing that this law says is that if someone is found guilty of violating civil rights, then they have to pay the towns back money in order to pay for their defense. Thank you.
Crystal, would you please ask your question of Liz?
With the suspension of the gas tax and proposals to further extend the suspension, how do you expect to fund current transportation projects, and would you support the implementation of tolls in Connecticut?
Yeah, so we've got a pretty good situation right now with the largest rainy day fund in history. I really do support continuing the elimination of the gas tax, at least through March, and then we have to continually reevaluate it. But I also think that it needs to go towards home heating oil. I think that gas just isn't enough right now. We're heading into the coldest time of the year, and that tax reduction should really be also done on diesel and home heating oil. You also asked if if I support tolls. The answer is no, I absolutely do not support tolls. But we also have a highway usage fee that is set to go into effect, which is what's meant to fill the special transportation fund. Right now, our special transportation fund is filled. We are doing a really great job. So if we take tolls off the table, thank goodness, and we can delay the implementation of that highway usage fee, I would be in support of that as well. But what we need to look at is long-term goals, right? And so when we look at the ability to keep this funded, a lot of it has to do with, and I'm going to get in the weeds and it's terrible and I'm sorry, but a lot of it has to do with our volatility cap. The volatility cap in the budget is what makes us put money away for the rainy day, or it makes us pay past debts. As long as we keep that, I think that the fund has a much greater chance of staying afloat. But right now, in this time of affordability and those concerns, extending the gas tax is necessary. Extending that, or rather the gas tax cut, extending the cut to home heating oil and diesel fuel is going to be fine without really putting a dent in the budget because we've planned so well. Thank you.
Randy?
She just voted to increase the tax on diesel. And
No, I did not.
my problem with politicians and their spending, or I have a problem with their spending, but part of the problem is that they hide the spending. Or they try to hide the tax increases to pay for the spending. And I don't know exactly what the multiple is of diesel tax versus regular gasoline, but diesel is quite a bit more expensive in terms of tax. Now, you get affected by that partly because everything that comes to your house was transported by diesel, and you also get impacted by that because, you know, truckers aren't willing to pay the tax if they can buy it cheaper in New Jersey, because it's well, I'll quit on that.
Okay. Jessica, would you please ask your question of Randy?
Anyone who pulls up to a gas pump or takes a trip to the grocery store has seen the costs of fuel and consumer goods and food increase tremendously throughout 2022. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics and its Consumer Price Index report in September stated area prices are generally up 7.2% in the Northeast region. If elected, what actions would you take to address inflation and reduce the costs of energy, groceries, and other consumer goods and services for Connecticut residents?
Well, I'd like to wave a wand and just say everything is half what it was yesterday, but that's not going to happen. And it's not really going to happen that a single individual in the state legislature is going to have much of an impact either. What we have to do is get the economy back on track. We have to get supply up. We have to, we have to drill more. We have to have the gas lines that were ended. We have to put them back in place. Now, I think that ultimately, renewable, clean energy is going to power us all. I think it will, but it's not going to happen overnight. And in the meantime, we need a reasonable price on fossil fuels. You know, we need coal. We need all of that stuff.
Okay. Liz?
So thank you. First, I want to clear something up. My opponent said I voted to increase tax on diesel. This is one of the problems where you are, when you have someone running for office that doesn't understand the law or how it worked. In 2007, 10 years before I was elected to the legislature, that is when they tied the tax amount to diesel to the actual cost, the wholesale cost of diesel. There was no vote in the last 10 years to change anything about diesel tax, and that is easily fact-checked. Secondly, I agree with him that solar is important, and I have a bill ready to go that will incentivize solar and energy efficiency, not only for residents, but also for businesses. And I would look to balance tax cuts in a way that is not inflationary. We need to make sure that anything that we put forward is not flooding the market with too many dollars, because as we know and as we've seen, that can be inflationary. However, I would like to, time out. There was so much to say.
Crystal, would you please ask the next question of Liz?
As Latinos become a growing segment of the Connecticut population, how do you plan on reaching out to the Latino community you serve?
Here in Wallingford, we have SCOW, and they're absolutely wonderful. And so I would really look to speak to the Latino community in a way and go where they are and hear from them exactly what they need. In the times that I have had discussions with leaders of the Latino community, we have worked together in the legislature with the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus to put together things that are addressing the issues that are really kind of necessary for that niche group. And the fact that Latinos are the fastest growing segment of our population it really tells us that we need to pay attention to what they're saying. Among the things that I've heard, they would like to see more jobs, better diversity, and I had quite a few conversations with them about the need to educate people on the COVID vaccinations. So essentially, my job in the legislature is to do what is best for residents, and if residents in the Latino community have a list of things that they want me to work on, then they can come to me and I'll just get to work right away.
Randy?
Well, I think what you said is absolutely correct. We have to reach out to not just Latinos, but Latinos specifically, because I think Latinos have been kind of taken for granted for too long. And you know, whether it's going door to door or going business to business, in particular, I would like to visit Latino businesses, because I'm sure that some of the trials and tribulations that I have in business, they also have, but maybe they have some that are unique. I'm good.
Thank you. Jessica, would you please ask the next question of Randy?
Car thefts and other crimes have been on the rise in Connecticut. In what ways do you think the state could be better at combating these issues?
Car crimes. I don't really have a good answer for that. I think that, you know, certainly having police on the street, certainly having, you know, cameras on the street. I was talking to a New Haven homicide cop, and he said that most homicides in Hartford are solved because they had cameras. But I think some of it has to do with the economy. People that are hurting for put food on the table, maybe resort to things that they shouldn't. So a combination of you know, preventative and proactive measures to make it a better place.
Liz?
I authored prevention legislation as part of the mental health bill, which would really focus on truancy, mental health, and food insecurity of our juveniles, which is what's been happening when you're talking about the car thefts. It's really been kind of a juvenile ring. Additionally, in, I believe it was 2020, we created a new law which would take any adult who is running a juvenile car theft ring, and we created a felony. So I'd be interested to see the statistics if we were able to charge anyone under that. Additionally, I introduced legislation this past year to further fund the police car theft task force, and we'd like to see more police departments get involved in that. We funded them to the tune of $6 million. And additionally, I support the state, and I'm going to have a bill to do this, to look at how we are addressing recruitment and retention of police officers.
Thanks. Jessica, would you please ask the next question of Liz?
Recently, Governor Ned Lamont announced that in collaboration with the CT Office of Early Childhood and the United Way of Connecticut, that child care workers will be receiving a pay bonus as a way to show gratitude for their work. How else do you think the government could be supporting child care workers at this time?
As the chair of the Children's Committee, this is something that I'm going to be working on diligently. Yes, the child care workers absolutely did receive that bonus. However, that's a one-time thing, and the unfortunate thing now is that after they get this one-time bonus, they're still some of the most underpaid individuals in this country. But childcare costs keep skyrocketing. So one of the things that the Children's Committee is interested in doing is actually creating incentives for businesses to help with programs for childcare for their employees. So a business might, if they have, say, 500 employees. Well, then they can either open a daycare on site, and we could provide tax incentives to do that, or we can provide tax incentives for smaller businesses to provide a stipend that can go towards childcare, or even making it part of your health benefits in a way. There's all different ways that we're looking at it. We're going to be looking at what is going on in Europe, who tend to have better childcare systems than America does. But this is definitely a problem nationwide. And the OEC, Office of Early Childhood, is very interested in working with us to find creative ways to incentivize people and businesses.
Randy?
Well, certainly you find husband and wives both having to go off to work and have child care for their children. And as in too many cases, one of those partners is working for almost nothing. I wish I had a good answer for that. I mean, you know, Ms. Linehan wants to throw money at it. I'm not sure that money is certainly would help in some ways, but I'm not sure that's the ultimate answer. I don't have the ultimate answer, but I'll look for it.
Crystal, would you please ask the next question of Randy?
If elected, what are some of the ways you would support small businesses and nonprofit organizations?
Well, the thing about small business, I mean, I've been doing that for 30 years. One of the things that is really kind of important to me is that when I first moved our business to Cheshire, the fire marshal came and visited, and he found a bunch of things that he didn't like, and he says, "Get them fixed." And I said, "Yes, sir." I got them fixed. OSHA came to the guy next door to me, and they fined him, I don't know, $30,000 or something like that. And I think government ought to be more of a partner to business than the enemy. If they had said to that guy, "This is what you need to do," I'm sure he would have done it. Now, he walked through my place, and I have a mezzanine kind of like that, and there was nothing to stop stuff from rolling off. And he says, "Yeah, you need to put a kick plate up there. And I just saved you three grand." And that's what I would like to see. That's what I would like to see government do, is to be a help, be like a big brother, be help for small business and big business too. I don't know if the nonprofits have the same kinds of problems, but those are the kind of things that that I would have to look into.
Liz?
I'll begin with the one-liner that we have funded nonprofits at their highest level in quite some time through this past budget adjustment. So we'll hopefully continue to do that. I am really happy to hear my opponent talk about having kind of a one-stop shop for small businesses to usher them through, because that's exactly what we did in the Small Business Express program. And we passed that in 2017. And we've heard from a great number of businesses that this has actually been very helpful for them. Additionally, the funding that we put into business and business growth has now resulted in a 30% jump in entrepreneurship here in the state of Connecticut. It's second in the country, behind only Vermont, which came in at 40%. So the things that we are doing are absolutely working, and we're going to continue to do more of the same. Oh, and do I still have 2 seconds? And I just put out on my Facebook page about a series of programs that we funded to escort small businesses through growing their business online and in person. So check out my Facebook page to read more about it.
Jessica, would you please ask the next question of Liz?
Last year, the CDC reported over 100,000 drug overdose deaths nationally, the highest number ever reported. What steps do you think the legislator should take as a response?
The legislature has been thinking of this almost nonstop, and we've put a lot of things in motion. Among those that we are working on currently and over the past two legislative sessions would be increasing funding for prevention. And that funding is coming from things like the opioid case settlement, the tobacco settlement. So we're not even really using the taxpayer dollars to do that, which means that with our $440 million extra dollars that we have in the budget for every year, perhaps there may be some more room to do things like that. But we need to focus a lot on mental health. Kids will turn to drugs to self-medicate. Adults will turn to drugs and alcohol to self-medicate. So there's more to it than simply helping people get off of drugs and alcohol. It's really about preventing it in the first place. And that is why we're very much focused on those community-based programs that reach out to certain communities, like the Latino community. We're making sure that we are having Spanish-speaking individuals. We've put together, in my mental health legislation, peer-to-peer counseling support on both the teen level and the parent level and the adult level. So these are proven effective methods to sobriety and to keeping people off of drugs and alcohol in the first place. We're going to continue to use those proven methods, the scientifically evidence-based proven methods for prevention and sobriety.
Randy?
I think it starts in the home. I think anything that we can do to have fathers living with their kids would go a long way toward preventing that. But it wouldn't necessarily be a panacea. Certainly we all know, nuclear families that have kids with drug problems. And, certainly education, certainly the education help out. And then on the police side, try to be more proactive is the right word, to get the drugs off the street.
Crystal, would you please ask the next question of Randy?
How will you support the LGBTQ plus community you serve?
How will I support them? I don't think that they're particularly special. Now maybe they think they are, but to me they're just another person. And if somebody wants me to call them by a different pronoun, I'm okay with that. I don't see the Constitution is there to protect all of us. I was a Marine to protect all of us, and that includes them, but I don't see them as being special. I certainly would be opposed to anybody that treated them any differently. They're just people.
Liz?
LGBTQ children are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than their peers. We need to really focus on LGBTQ kids. And I have a history of doing that, and I will continue to do that as one of my main focuses as the chair of the Children's Committee. And forgive me if I feel as though I'm burning with that, but to hear someone say that they're not special is really one of the reasons why these kids may turn to suicide in the first place. See them for who they are and believe in them and support them in being who they are. And I will continue to write legislation that educates everybody on those facts. I also put forth the LGBTQ Bill of Rights for children who are in the care of the Department of Children and Families and in the foster care system.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I only have a minute, but I could go on forever.
Crystal, would you please ask the next question to Liz?
In what ways do you think the town of Wallingford has been sustainable, and in what ways do you think it could improve? And how would you assist in these efforts?
The town of Wallingford has actually done a really great job of keeping their tax rate relatively low, and I'm proud to see that. Unfortunately, though, it has taken them some time to get up to speed with technology. But now that has happened, things are really moving in the right direction. I love the fact that there's Wallingford Electric. That's fantastic, and I'd like to see that happen around the state to keep electricity prices lower for more residents. But my job as a legislator is actually to secure state funding in order to bring it back to Wallingford in order to keep those property taxes low, because the more that we can fund on the state level, it means it doesn't go directly into their property taxes to fund. So we help fund the schools, we help fund the municipality. This year, I was able to help get $1 million for the expansion of the Wallingford YMCA. Additionally, we helped get Gaylord $6.5 million in funding to upgrade their services. We received funding through the DOT and DEEP for the Quinnipiac River Linear Trail, and these are all things that can improve the quality of life of Wallingford residents without actually adding to their property taxes. And that is an important job as a legislator, and I'm going to keep doing that. I've been very successful. Additionally, I can't forget the very popular program that brought in $64,000 per year for Wallingford to fund nip bottle cleanup. And as your state representative, I can tell you I get emails often about the fact that there were so many nip bottles, and we are now funding the ability to clean it up so that we can have a cleaner Wallingford. And that actually goes to all of our towns. Every town gets money for that.
Thank you. Randy?
One of my pet peeves is politicians that take money out of one pocket and then give it back to you in the other one. Ms. Linehan just said how much money she was giving back to you. It's your money in the first place. I'm good.
Jessica, would you ask the next question of Randy?
How do you think the state of Connecticut and the town of Wallingford could improve access to public transportation?
Well, you got a brand new train station. Connecticut in particular, the United States in general, is a huge place. And public transportation certainly has a place in that, but it's not the panacea, and it's not going to get cars off the road. Now, I mentioned the train station. It's a great asset, and I'm sure it's very popular, but you still got to get there in your car. And now I'm a big bicycle rider. I rode over 1,000 miles this year, and I would love to be able to ride my bicycle wherever I went, but that's just not happening in February. I don't think buses would be appropriate in Wallingford. Maybe on Route 5, but where else are you going to put a bus? And how are people going to walk from, Main Street down there? Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Liz?
Public transportation is actually about more than just getting cars off the road, although that's really wonderful. The train station is fantastic. The train doesn't run often enough. Doesn't have enough cars. Let's see if we can get ridership up so that we can have the trains come more often. We do need more bus service serving Wallingford, especially in business parks. We need to have buses go to business parks so that they can carry workers. It's going to help businesses as well. The great thing about public transportation is that's how we get young people here. And if we want young people to come into the state of Connecticut to do the jobs that are open, especially in manufacturing, high-tech manufacturing. If we want more young people to come in, we need to have more public transportation. The thing is to stop cutting the amount of bus routes and bus lines. It's also about having more trains running and the ability to cross-connect those trains with the bus routes so that you can take a bus to get to the train.
Thank you. Crystal, would you ask the next question of Liz?
According to the Sandy Hook Promise, the U.S. has had 2,032 school shootings since 1970. What security measures would you support to make schools safer for students in Connecticut?
This is so important, especially because I have 3 school-aged children, so I see this all the time. Once again, in the mental health legislation that I authored and passed this year, we were focused on this. And by addressing things like truancy, because truancy is something that is sometimes seen as a behavior problem when it's actually can be a mental health problem. And it's often the first sign of a mental health issue. So by doing that, we also created a program for mental health first aid, which is a student peer-to-peer program, which we will be completely putting out to the school districts for free starting next year, because the current program is being charged at $50,000 per pop, which is incredible and ridiculous. But we will also, as we address those issues, I also put in for the first time ever, we now have trauma coordinators at the RESC level, which is the Regional Educational Service Centers. And so now we have trauma support specialists that will come in and deal with the violence in the schools. And those kids who have seen the trauma over and over again of violence in their neighborhoods, those kids who have trauma at home and are acting out at school, those are the things that kind of make a school shooter. So we will be addressing that in the coming years, fully funded, and it's a train-the-trainer model. So all we need to do is get these trainings into schools, and it starts to spread like wildfire. And that's the kind of spreading we like to see when it comes to school violence, is actually stopping it before it begins.
Randy?
Well, almost, in fact, all of these school shooters have mental problems. And I think you would minimize it if you could identify those problems early. But the simple answer to school security is to put an armed policeman there. I see some disagreements in the audience, but there is nothing like a guy with a gun to stop other guys with guns. Maybe I'm being oversimplified and you don't like it, but if there's a shooter that comes after me, I wish I had a gun.
Jessica, would you ask the last question of the segment of Randy?
Earlier this year, state lawmakers passed legislation intended to enable local law enforcement and courts to more effectively respond to youth charged with multiple or repeat motor vehicle thefts. Do you think these measures adequately address issues of juvenile crime and motor vehicle thefts? If not, what further action do you propose?
Could you read that to me one more time, please?
Earlier this year, state lawmakers passed legislation intended to enable local law enforcement and courts to more effectively respond to youth charged with multiple or repeat motor vehicle thefts. Do you think these measures adequately address issues of juvenile crime and motor vehicle thefts? If not, what further action do you propose?
No, I'm certainly in favor of locking them up. I'm not terribly sympathetic to people that commit crimes and don't get punished for it. There have been a lot of recent headlines of one guy got arrested 15 times in one day and the cops kept letting him go. I mean, does that make any sense?
Liz?
Can you just repeat the question one more time? I want to make sure I can answer it for you adequately.
Earlier this year, state lawmakers passed legislation intended to enable local law enforcement and courts to more effectively respond to youth charged with multiple or repeat motor vehicle thefts. Do you think these measures adequately address issues of juvenile crime and motor vehicle thefts? If not, what further action do you propose?
I think it's a great start. The issue is that it just went into effect, so we need to have time for the data to come back. I am not aware of a juvenile being arrested 15 separate times in one day. However, this legislation does now allow for GPS monitoring for offenders, for repeat offenders. Additionally, the incarceration period has now been doubled if a judge would like to do that. But once again, you know, it's not just about locking them up, as my opponent had said. It's really also about stopping it before it happens. So that bill that you're discussing, it is a good part of it, but the other part is also the legislation that I wrote and put forward actually and passed to stop kids from going into crime in the first place, like we funded after-school programs and work programs and job programs.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes the question and answer portion of the program. Each candidate will now have 3 minutes to make a closing statement. Liz Linehan, would you please begin?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me here. I always love coming here. This is one of my favorite times of the election season because we get to really have that discussion back and forth so that people can see the differences in the two candidates. I think what was strikingly clear here tonight is the differences experience. I can't count how many times my opponent had said that he didn't have an answer for that. And as we are heading into an even more, I don't want to say scary time because I don't like that word, but an unsure time with the possibility of heading into a recession, I think experience is going to be more important now than it ever was. And my track record of actually addressing each of the points that you brought out today has been, it shows that I am on top of what things are needed here in the state of Connecticut, and we're just starting. We continue to address these issues and we build off of everything that we did last year. Let me give you some examples. So the child tax credit. The child tax credit was something that we fought for in the legislature and passed in the budget. And Democrats were the ones that put this forward and passed it. There was only one Republican that voted for that in the House, and I don't believe any Republicans in the Senate. But that tax credit is something that when I knock doors, I hear that it was the single most helpful thing to them in the past year. So I will have legislation to actually make that child tax credit permanent. Additionally, I have legislation set to go that would take the elimination of retirement income from the income tax, that I would raise the limit to $150,000 for married couples, and then also eliminate the tax cliff. So if you make over $150,000 in your retirement income as a senior, you are only therefore taxed on the amount over the limit. This will save a ton of money for seniors and allow them to retire and stay in their home if they choose. I will continue to work on the crime issue. I will continue to work for our children, bring education dollars back. And as chair of the Children's Committee, there's still so much left to do for our children's mental health that I will continue to build upon what we have worked on and succeeded at in the past 2 years. I thank everybody here, everybody in the town of Wallingford for being so supportive of the work that we're doing. And I ask that if there's anything that you would like to see me work on that we haven't mentioned here tonight, please feel free to reach out to me, whether through social media or my email. I am at my best when I know what it is that you need from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Randy Rains, would you please give your statement?
Well, I've been a husband for 45 years, a father for over 40, and I have 5 grandchildren. But the reason that you should really vote for me is because I've run a manufacturing business for over 30 years. And in the 30 years, I've never laid anybody off, and I've never failed to pay my bills on time. And the reason is I manage my money very conservatively. I'm driving a 14-year-old truck, 12-year-old car. My boat's 22 years old. My wife's 72. But I'll manage your money just as conservatively as I manage mine. A wise old man, business consultant, once told me, he said, you can never go out of business if you're cash flow positive. And being cash flow positive means you don't take on debt. And our state has got a significant amount of debt. Cheshire has a significant amount of debt. I stand here, I sit here before you and, ask for your vote because of the manufacturing experience. Everything you own was manufactured. Now, you can get by without a barber. I've been cutting my own hair since the barbers closed in, for COVID. You can get by with a lot of other things that, but you can't get by without manufacturers. And I don't believe our state has a lot of manufacturers in the General Assembly. I looked up a few bios yesterday. Every single one of the bios I looked up was claimed to be in small business, including my opponent. None of them said what those businesses were. That's the bottom line. Hartford needs manufacturing. Connecticut needs manufacturing. We've lost most of United Technologies. It's down in Florida now. And other companies have moved out. And I think I'll end on that.
Thank you. This concludes the State Representative 103rd District segment of the 2022 Candidates Forum. On behalf of the Wallingford Community Women, I thank you for watching and remind you to vote on November 8th. Have a good night.